And a very good evening to you, and welcome to today's edition of Politics 101. Good evening to you, wherever you're joining us from, whether you're joining us from Guyana or in the wider Caribbean, or whether you're joining us from North America, Europe, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to Politics 101. Please share the link. Please share the link. Politics 101. It's good to be back. It's good to be back. We've been gone for a week. As you know, last week we were at the conference in Washington, D.C. And yesterday I was down with a slight bout of the flu and incessant coughing. So they don't want to come on and with all that coughing. But we are here today feeling much better, much better. So welcome to Politics 101. Please share the link. Please share the link. We're on. Lots happening today. Lots happening today. I guess everyone is hooked into what's happening in the United States of America. As you know, the Speaker of the House of Representatives was today ousted. Speaker McCarthy, ousted by his colleagues. Historic in more than 200 years, 234 years of the House of Representatives. The first time a speaker was ousted. Quite big news. Lots of turmoil there in the United States of America. Democracy on trial, as they say. We are going to be joined this evening. We're going to be joined this evening by GHK Lally. He's already backstage, and we are going to be talking about the developments in Guyana. Of course, that big conference, last week in Washington, D.C., organized by the CGID, Rickford Burke, and his group, and quite a few of us were there. Lots of response by the government to that conference. Yes, and we have the recent developments here. The teachers, the president meeting with teachers yesterday behind the back of their unions, offering them allowances instead of salary raise. My goodness, a PPP government, the party of Chedi Jagan, the party of Gawu, and Nasi, really doing union busting. And the president is adamant that he's not meeting with the union. We're in new times in Guyana. We'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about that conference. Welcome to all of you. Please share the link. Please do share the link. We're on. Let everyone know that we're on. We're on tonight. GHK Lal is going to be our special guest. GHK, as you know, is a regular here on this program. He has his own program. He does a lot of writing in the newspapers. So he's going to be on. He's going to be on in a couple of minutes. Good evening to all of you. It's good to see you back. The Venezuelans, we've been hearing that term, saber rattling. The Venezuelans are upping the ante. They are renewing their demands for Guyana's territory, calling for a referendum. The Venezuelan president has asked to meet directly with Guyana. Guyana's refused, quite correctly, saying the matter is before the International Court of Justice. You go to the court when bilaterals break down. You don't go for bilaterals after the matter is before the court. But Venezuela renewing their claim. We saw lots of Venezuelans, a boat of Venezuelans landing in Guyana, and lots of mystery as to what happened after then. Lots of news happening. But that conference in Washington, D.C., yours truly, I was there. And it's, when you look at the propaganda and read the propaganda coming out from the government in response to the conference, you're asking yourself, are they talking about something that you were present at? The Prime Minister's office describing us as unpatriotic. My goodness. Clearly, the conference got under the government's skin. They are terrified about Guyanese taking their case to the international scene, especially to the Americans. And you all know I've been clear on this program, very clear on this program. The 2020 elections, it's not over. It's not over. Because of the intervention at the 2020 elections, it has consequences. I always say that. It has consequences. There's a term they use in America called blowback. Imagine a party that spent tens of millions of US dollars lobbying the American government to intervene in the 2020 election. And the American government actually sanctioned one participant, that is the coalition, imposed sanctions on them before the results were announced. That's a fact. If that is not intervention, then I don't know what is. The Americans were to later say the elections were disputed and the government was installed. If you listen to people, they think that that is a term that was coined by the opposition. No, it was the State Department that said that the elections were disputed and that the government was installed. Now imagine a party that went so far, spent all that money, got the Americans involved. The Americans acted openly. These sanctions were not secret, they were openly. Now, the other side is going to the Americans and making their case. And you're saying they're unpatriotic. My goodness. You know, I was chosen as one of the persons who spoke in the meeting with Hakeem Jeffries and members of the Black Caucus. There were two meetings. The parliamentarians met with them on the first day. And then those of us who were non-parliamentarians met with them on the second day. And I was one of the speakers on behalf of a larger group. There were 17 of us, and 4 or 5 of us were asked to speak on behalf of the group. And I made it very clear in my remarks to Mr. Jeffries that we do not come here to ask the Black Caucus to intervene in Guyana's affairs. We do not come here to ask for regime change. I was very, very clear about that because I knew that unpatriotic thing was coming. And I said to the delegation from the Black Caucus, we do not come here to ask you to intervene in Guyana's internal affairs, nor do we come here to ask for regime change. We come here as citizens of a country where America has interests and in which America acted recently. And I recounted America's role in the 2020 elections. And I asked the Black Caucus, based on its charter, because the charter of the Black Caucus says that the Black Caucus is not just concerned about issues that have to do with African Americans, but issues to do with Black people all over the world. And when I said that, Congressman Jeffries repeated, he said, there was a reason that the founders of the Black Caucus did not call it an African American caucus. They called it a Black Caucus. To reinforce that their interest is not just with Black people in America, but Black people all over the world. And I reminded the CBC, the members there, that the Black Caucus played an important role in helping to dismantle authoritarianism under Baby Doc in Haiti. They also played a pivotal role in dismantling apartheid. And so in coming to bring before the Black Caucus our concern about human rights abuses in Guyana, we were not inviting them to intervene or to engage in regime change, but to be faithful to their own charter. So this whole nonsense about patriotism and being unpatriotic, I don't know. I don't know, but I will deal with that as the days roll on. But I just wanted to say that tonight. I just wanted to say that. I will say more about that meeting. I wasn't at the first meeting because I'm not a parliamentarian. The other issue about the people asking for evidence also is not true. At the meeting that I was at, they asked if we have these charges documented, and we said yes. They asked if there are human rights organizations in Guyana that recorded it, and we said yes. The people weren't stretching their hands and saying, give us the evidence. They assume that we have evidence. They assumed that we have evidence. That one of the things we called for was a fact-finding mission to Guyana. And they told us for a fact-finding mission, they will have to have the human rights abuses documented because they will have to pass it on to the Department of State, which will facilitate the fact-finding mission. They weren't asking us for evidence that we didn't have. They were reinforcing our case by saying that documented evidence is pivotal. But of course, they jumped on it and said we went there without evidence. When at the conference itself, we had presentations of the very evidence that they're saying that we didn't have. Kathy used the whole presentation of her husband's evidence. Other presenters did presentations of the evidence. So how come we didn't have evidence and we were showing the evidence at the conference? The PPP is in distress. They're desperate. We are using their own playbook. They in secret lobbied the American government before the 2020 election. In secret. We didn't know what was going on until after the election. Then is when we realized what they were doing for 5 years. We are doing our thing in the open. We're not hiding. No clandestine stuff. No regime change. We are saying there are human rights abuses in Guyana, and we are asking the Congressional Black Caucus to come to Guyana and to investigate our charges. I will say more as the days go on. But let me bring in my guest tonight, GHK Lal, who is a stranger to this program. GHK,
good evening.
How are you?
Well, I'm listening to you there, and lots of revelations, good ones. And I must say, I'm inspired by some of the things I just heard you say, particularly with the visit, because I have spoken to some other people who were there, and it was not at the high point, the high water mark that I was expecting it to be. But nevertheless, I hear you speaking about unpatriotic. What could be unpatriotic about representing the interests of those Guyanese that are left out? Which is why we are here today and in all those other programs that dedicate themselves to these kinds of issues and subjects that nobody wants to be spoken about. To go to Washington, we've got to go full strength. I think there's more work to be done. I think a lot of groundwork has been laid. I think it's the right audience, and you've got to cherish that kind of audience because it can bring results. The idea of using from the same playbook is certainly a very, very good one. It can't be good for one foot, one shoe, and not good for the other. Because look, we're not speaking to each other. We speak to each other on Venezuela, of all things, but we speak about no other things. But we'll come to Venezuela in a moment, what is behind Venezuela, and what is really should be in there for us. But I'm glad that we've had that initial audience with the Black Congressional Caucus. Now, Mr. Jeffries is hearing a lot from his constituents. Yvette Clarke, the same thing. So that chestnut has to be stirred where it's at right now. It's got to be built upon. So that's what I say, and I say good evening to everyone wherever you may be.
Yes, and Yvette Clarke, for example, in the meeting that I was in, she says, evidence. I hear that every week because my hairdresser is Guyanese, and I get an earful every week when I go to my hairdresser on what's happening in Guyana. And what she and the others were saying, here is the procedure for us to go from here to a fact-finding mission. You will have to give us that documented evidence. We will then have to turn that over to the State Department. They will then facilitate the meeting. They were explaining to us the procedure. They weren't saying, give us the evidence here, let's get it. And so I just wanted to clarify that all that evidence that Ipadaji has gathered over a period of time, and you, GHK, are aware of that. All that evidence that was Ipadaji presented to the United Nations, we have that. We had it there. If they had said, give us it, We weren't going to be able to give them the evidence, the CDs, the what have you. All that was there. So the people weren't saying, you come here, you make accusations, you don't have the evidence. All they were saying, this is the procedure. And of course, the government using it as propaganda. But see, GHK, are you surprised at the
Let, let,
frenzy
let
over
me
this?
say this. Let me say
Yes,
this first of for all our listeners, including our PPP brothers. I had a role in a number of conversations and presentations with IPADA G. So at first blush, I was pretty startled that that considerable body of evidence that was gathered, that was assembled, may not have been part of that. But then it was subsequently sent to me what Mrs. Hughes presented, which is pretty comprehensive. And from what I'm hearing from you, that was only one aspect of it. I know about the other aspects. I've been a part of the other aspects and presentations. So it's good to hear that, and I stand corrected. And I want to say before all, I stand corrected in terms of what was available for
yes,
presentation and what
yes,
was presented. And I have no qualms about saying that in the open. Now, so we have that in the middle of the table. In answer to your question, if I'm surprised, no, 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 no. Anytime we are surprised about that, it means that we've either become smug or we've become complacent. In that we are taking the PPP for granted, meaning that they are sitting on their laurels, and that they really don't care what the opposition does or what people who disagree and people who have conscientious objections register. But the PPP is very, very alert, and it's always searching for some angle. It is always searching for some little crease. An angle may be too big, a little crease where it can insert some sort of difference, some sort of malice, some sort of mischief that can make people think differently from what occurred. And I think when they throw in things like evidence and patriotism, then where was your patriotism in pre 2020? Where is your patriotism now, given what is happening with our patrimony? Where is the patriotism of those who attack those who say we should get a little bit more, or we should be treated more fairly, or we should be treated respectfully, when people take the side of the Americans and attack you and I as Americans, and Guyanese who are not Americans, but who are genuinely concerned of doing a little better than we are doing now, perhaps a lot better than we should. So there is no surprise there at all. This is about power. This is about being in control. This is about controlling the narrative. This is about controlling how we think and how we should think and channeling those along this narrow partisan pathway. I'm not
yes.
surprised at all.
Yes, and you know that whole thing that the people who were scheduled to speak at the meeting didn't show up and all of that stuff. We know what was going on up there on the hill, and so on the second day they said, since we are not able to come to address you at your meeting, we invite you to come to Capitol Hill to meet with us. Hence that second meeting on the second day because of what was happening there. So it is not that these people didn't want to associate themselves with the conference, so they didn't come, as the PPP saying. They were
Well,
busy and they said, look, we are not able to leave here to come to the conference to speak to you. So come, bring a delegation and come. So what happened is that 17 of us went to meet with Hakim Jeffries and Yvette Clark, and the others did a tour of the Capitol. while we were in there at the meeting. So all of that propaganda that the people didn't want to associate themselves is really what is that second meeting was in lieu of the fact that they were not able to come to leave Capitol Hill, so they invited us to go there.
But let me say this: I am glad that you introduced that into this conversation, because somebody else who was there, who like yourself doesn't live in Guyana at all, said that to me, and who participated, shared that exact same thing with me. I'm sitting over here in Georgetown, and I can understand the tension and the urgency on Capitol Hill. I mean, a government shutdown is looming. That's
Yes,
a big deal. And look what happened today. The tension, because of that being averted, or should have been averted for 45 days, now you've got a speaker who is the victim of the unprecedented.
yes,
He's gone. And so the chaos, the upheavals continue. So this is the atmosphere in which you folks found yourself. And I think it is a testimony to the Black Congressional Caucus that it says, you know what? We're going to find some space for you here. You come over, and it's going to be hit and miss and hit and run and off and on and all of that. But because we were on call, excuse me, these guys were on call.
yes.
So they couldn't leave there. They had to be there.
And
So
they
it's good
gave
that you
us,
still met.
yes, and they gave us more time than was allotted for the meeting.
Yeah.
They went over the time that they gave us by about 15 to 20 minutes.
Hmm.
So we were accommodated. We were given all the protocols. We were treated very, very seriously in that meeting. So I just want the viewers, the listeners to this program, to correct that. I know Mr. The CGID will be having a program tonight, and they will give a more in-depth um, explanation of what went on. But I just wanted to clear the air here on this program tonight, so that we are very clear that all that nonsense that the PPP is spewing did not occur. This is what happened.
I think
GHK, yes, go ahead.
before you go further, one final comment. I heard you say about the fact finding aspect that is percolating.
Yes,
Excuse me. I think that should be kept on the front burner, because people who are fearful now, in the right circumstances, a fact finding mission comes from Capitol Hill, the Black Congressional Caucus, or a mixed caucus, comes down here. People will be prepared, who have been victims, who have been victimized and demonized, ostracized, and criminalized. They are going to come forward. Families who have lost loved ones under extrajudicial circumstances, people who can't work, people who have been put out of work, and people who have lost whatever they've lost, either their homes or their places, they are going to say, well, what have we got to lose? And I think it is very important that you folks who are leading the charge here, that you keep leaning for that fact-finding mission here. I think that's where everything is going to come together. And if you're talking about evidence, you can't beat that. You can't beat
right.
that.
Right. And thank you very much, because I was one of the persons mandated to raise the issue of the fact-finding mission. I spoke about the 4 instances where homes were bulldozed, and they said, good, that is what we want to hear. Put all of that in the package of human rights violations. I spoke about the number of extrajudicial killings since 2020. They said, yes, that's what we want to. So this all nonsense that we didn't go there with evidence. Evidence. In Linden, in Mocha, in Georgetown, in Hillfoot, Homes were bulldozed. I said that to the delegation. 4 instances were bulldozed. What more evidence? They said we are glad for that evidence. Put all of those human rights violations in the package that we would need. So that is what transpired. GHK Lal, there's never a dull day in Guyana. The president met with teachers yesterday, and in a clear case of union busting, basically telling teachers, don't worry about salary raises. We're going to give you some allowances. Please, please, GHK, is that the president of Guyana, of the People's Progressive Party, the party of Chedi Jagan, the party of Gawu? Is that what is going on in Guyana? Talk to me.
I think the first thing that the president has to do, if he's really interested in leading and in governing, is to have the GTU in that conversation. The GTU has to be mandatorily a part of any such conversation. And we can bring up allowances and stipends and extras and classroom grants and whatever. And we can say, look, we can parse through this thing. Deunionization, union busting, yes, I hear that. And I think we're well on the way to that. We have seen the impositions over the years in the wider public service. Let's take what happened with the teachers. The teachers have been knocking on the door. And I think that there has to be some give on both sides. And it is incumbent that the president takes the lead in this, given the heritage of his own political group, given the thing that was closest to the heart, the roots of where Chedi Jagan came from, so to speak. You know, we have to face something, Dr. Hines. Political scientists, sociologists, ordinary citizens like me, we like to talk about democracy. One of the hallmarks of democracy, or one of the features that must be prominent, it must be self-correction, self-examination that leads to self-criticism and then self-correction. The success, the triumph of democracy is based on the willingness to compromise, to get past our differences. But when the president unilaterally inter- intervenes and interjects, well, we're going to give you this allowance, we're going to do these things for you, and we're going to make this possible for you. It's like what is unsaid, but what is heard, you don't worry with the union. You don't worry about the GTU. I dealing with you, we dealing with you, and this is what gonna happen. This is what we gonna make happen. So you have just made a mockery of collective bargaining and all those other things that go into trade unionism and labor and the Labor Act, etc. in this country. I think the president needs to the government as a whole needs to stop doing this, but it's part of a pattern that we are going to tell you how it is going to be. We're going to do that in the democratic organs. We're going to do that in the groups that have unions. Teachers are one, excuse me, and the public service is another. I see the GPSU is really rearing up now, railing up. But somewhere along the line, this has got to stop, or we're not going to get anywhere. We are not going to get anywhere. And the only thing on which we're going to have a meeting of the minds is over our neighbors. And I wonder how deep that goes. But in terms of the teacher, look, the teachers are asking for salary increases through their representatives. You come and say, I'm going to give you allowances. And it's going to work procedurally, these are the bare bones sketches. Why not sit and have the same kind of conversation with the union? I am putting on the table allowances. You're putting together increases. Let's see how we can have some sort of fusion here, a bit of give and take in here. You know what we're doing here, Dr. Hines? What we're doing here is we are having emails. The emails say this is what I'm saying, and you say your email say this is what I'm saying. Instead of having a conversation where we can massage the differences, where we can massage our the elements of what we're advocating. The president does that for the government. The teachers union do that for the teachers. But we're not having that conversation. It's it's I hear the Ministry of Education. I think it was the minister who said, "Well, we have been open and we have a good relationship with the union," and yet the president goes and does this. Something is missing here, or maybe some synapse in my brain is not firing. And I don't think it's that. I think that something is missing here. Somebody is not putting out the whole story. And there's this disconnect. The president is talking from up on high, and the union and the teachers are saying from over there, you're hearing some echoes. Well, no, that ain't going to work. How are we ever going to get on the same page and singing from the same book? That's the hard reality that we are facing. And I think the president is the president. He has to set the example and the tone. Mr. President of the GTU and your team, we will meet with you. You come with your agenda. This is my agenda, and we'll go from there. This imposition and this unilateralism has been going on for too long, and I wonder how long more this is going to be the modus operandi.
And thank you very much. And I did in my presentation to Congressman Jeffries and the other members of his team, I raised the question of collective bargaining as part of the human rights violations. I just want the workers who are listening and watching this program tonight that your issue was raised with the delegation, that the government is flouting labor rules and labor laws. These are internationally accepted norms. Collective bargaining is not something that came easy. This month, 70 years ago, October 1953, a government of Guyana, the first elected government under self-rule, was overthrown by the British. And part of the reason was because they passed a law granting unions the legal right to represent workers. You all hear me? A government was overthrown in the struggle for the right of workers to be represented by union. A PPP government. And here we have a PPP government 70 years later violating that very right. My goodness, how low can we go? How low can we go? Whatever else you can say about Jagan and Burnham and Eric Williams and the Birds and the Manleys of that generation, they respected the right of collective bargaining. Because almost all of those political parties came out of the trade union. The trade union was the pioneer organization in our Caribbean as far as the struggle for rights are concerned. And today, a government of Chetty Jagan's party is trampling on trade unions and the right to collective bargaining. GSK Lal, you ask how long, how much longer? I
Yeah.
remember that rhetorical question by Martin Luther King Jr. during the civil rights struggle. How long? Not long. In giving that speech after the successful march over the Pettus Bridge there in Selma.
Mm-hmm.
And when he gave that speech, it's soaring in my ears right now. How long? Not long. And I hope as we invoke Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. here tonight, that how long will not be much longer, not longer. GSK Lal.
In scripture, in the gospel, we talk about the multitudes. There's always, and the multitudes follow Jesus, and the
Yes,
multitudes gather around the mountain for the sermon on the multitude. Political parties in the region and in this country, the PPP particularly, has its founding and its roots in what we call not the multitude, but the mass,
the
the
mass.
masses, and the mass is the greatest aggregation or mass of workers, conglomeration of citizens. We're workers. We have the Enmore martyrs. We have the other workers who have left a thrilling, and poignant example of what workers had to go through to be where they are today. You mentioned about 1950, 1953, and I think you were being very genteel when you say, look at where the PPP is today. I think it has turned everything on its head.
Yeah,
That its ideals, what
yeah.
should be its sacred ideals. This is an untouchable right. This is an untouchable relationship, collective bargaining, agency. Instead of that, nothing matters anymore except that we will have it our way. And our way is this way. We are going to impose it upon you. We are going to act unilaterally. We are going to be heavy handed and take it or leave it. But take it or leave it usually comes back to that non rhetorical question: how long? Not much longer.
Not much longer. GHK Lal here tonight. Good evening to all of you. It's good to be back after a week. We were away at the conference last week, and yesterday I was a little bit under the weather. Still, I am a little, but we're glad to be back. Good evening to Donna Harcourt. We still, we still don't have justice for your son. This is the mother of Crummy Wing, who was brutally murdered. And I know that family is still crying out for justice. There is still no justice almost 10 years later. Almost 10 years later. Good evening to you, Mrs. Harcourt. And your case, your son's case, was part of the case we made to Washington about the number of mainly young Black men who have been murdered under the PPP regime. They talk about evidence. Your son is part of that evidence. Good evening to you. And as the Rastafarians would say, enough respect for keeping the faith. Good evening to you, Denise. Denise Booker, our regular, she's back. She herself was under the weather in recent weeks. It's good to see you back and and alive and well, and doing what you do here on the evenings, keeping watch with us. Good evening to you, Emily. Emily Durant, who is also our regular, one of our regular, Yonette Elias. Good evening to all of you. And to all of you in Washington, D.C., who came to the conference, but uh, there was a meet and greet for Brother Kedaki and myself, organized by the owners of the Grave Restaurant. They're proud Baronians, and they organized a meet and greet on Friday night. and many of you came out. Some of you traveled from as far as New Jersey. People came from Baltimore, and we had a good meet and greet. We were able to update people on the conference and on what's happening in Guyana. We will talk more about that in the coming days. Um, Yesterday, last evening in Georgia, there was also a meet and greet, but the Kedaki Amsterdam was there. And again, thank you there in Atlanta, Georgia, for organizing those events. Um, struggle is something that is about people, leaders. I remember when I heard Walter Rodney for the first time in 1974, almost 50 years ago, as a little teenager, early in my early teens, hearing him say that history is not made just by leaders. More importantly, history is made by ordinary people, often nameless. And he said that at some point, somewhere, sometime in the future, somebody's going to record that we were sitting in this classroom. It was at Brother UC School, County High School. We were there. Somebody would record that we were sitting here on the floor in this school talking about how to progress our country. And I remember running home after that meeting to telling my auntie, I heard this man, Dr. Rodney, said that people like me could make history. And I want to join that thing, and she gave me permission. That is how I became a member of the WPA. It must have been, I was about age 14 or so. But just somebody saying to me that you could make history made a big difference in my life. And I want to say to all of you who come onto these programs, you are the ones who are making history. Sometime in the near future, somebody is going to do their PhD thesis on these programs that we do in the evenings. They're going to come back. They're going to research these programs, and they're going to record it in history. And you, the viewers, are the ones who are going to be at the center of what we are doing. GHK, Venezuela, Venezuela, Venezuela. You said earlier, it's the one thing that we agree on. And is the one thing that the president called the opposition leader about. I'm puzzled. I'm wondering, how could the Venezuelans, with the American presence in Guyana, still be being so vicious in their commentary, in their rhetoric about Guyana's land? What's going on? Explain that puzzle for us.
Before we go further, I think I heard you address Mrs. Harcourt, the mother of the deceased Mr. Crummy. To Mrs. Harcourt, I say good evening and greetings. It's been a long time. And I just want to say that the gate and the door is still open. They're still open. You know where to find me. You know what to expect from me. Venezuela. Why? The context of Venezuela is that, put this not in country to country terms, I'd like to put this in man to man, woman to woman, human terms. I cast my eyes across the fence, and there is this land. And 2/3 of it, historically, has been claimed by my people as theirs. If it was just desert land, rocks, and the haven of hyenas and jackals, I may not be so interested. But because it's rich land, I'm not going anywhere. That land is part of my sacred heritage, my inheritance. And I am going to hold on to that for dear life. And I don't have to be a politician. So, with the discoveries of more and more barrels of oil, billions of barrels of oil. I, as a Venezuelan leader, a Venezuelan general, a Venezuelan naval admiral, or a Venezuelan citizen, I feel that that land belongs to me. That oil belongs to me. That gold and bauxite belongs to me. And it's not something that I'm going to relinquish. So there is that visceral connection of Venezuelans that the leaders are trying to stoke through a referendum that what is going on in Guyana is theirs and it must not be given up. That's from the Venezuelan side. That's how I see this unfolding. And it has unfolded for in the decades gone, and it's going to come back again. It's not going to go away, Brother David, my fellow Guyanese, regardless of the government in power. And the people have already said, whatever the ICJ says, we know how we're going to deal with that. We already have where we are with that. So the Venezuelan claim is not going away. And I want to say something that I have said repeatedly in different forums. We can have all the oil in the world. We can get all the money for it, $150 a barrel, $200 a barrel. Don't worry about the downside of that. But if we can't fix our problems, our political and racial problems, then all that oil money is going to be worth naught. It's going to be worth nothing. Now, here's why. It is instructive, it is enlightening that the president who does not want to speak to the opposition leader, and it is claimed vice versa, that he doesn't want to shake my hands and so on and so forth. A call was made. I think it was a call, it wasn't an arm's length thing. On the one thing in this country that can bring us together, at least the leaders together, it is Venezuela. It is Venezuela. And what is Venezuela what is the Venezuelan claim about? Dr. Hines, what is behind the claim? That's why I went about desert and rich land and grasslands and all of that. It is about what is in that land. And in that land there are abundant riches. Call it whatever in whatever form, oil or gold or uranium or timber. Now here, the people want our thing. The people want your thing, my brothers and sisters. They want what belongs to Dr. Hines, though he might be a naturalized American, and to me, another naturalized American. And for us, the Americans drop off here. There's no hyphen. We are Guyanese at this moment. I'm 67 years of age, and I'm ready to answer whatever call this country has to call for me. So let's get that straight on the Venezuelan issue. It is good. It's as heartwarming for me that the president can reach to the opposition leader and the opposition leader can speak on behalf of the entire opposition and said, we are as one on this matter of territorial integrity and border and sovereignty. I like that. Some people may not agree with that, but I like that. But there is the other side, which is just as important. Because the Venezuelan claim is about our riches and because it brings us together, therefore, the substance of that claim must be the substance that binds us together, that brings us to our senses, so that everybody, every single Guyanese, Indian, Black, Amerindian, mixed, whomever, will sit at a table. That's Martin Luther King's there with the red sons of Georgia and the black child and the white was sit together at that table and say, how do we deal with this endowment and patrimony that we have been given? We cannot only talk about unity and about oneness and togetherness when the existential Venezuelan threat hovers over our heads. We must not allow ourselves to fall into that trap. We must now not allow ourselves to be so limited. We must not allow ourselves to be so one-sided, so unilateral, that only Venezuela, so unidimensional, that only Venezuela has a sufficiency of substance to bring us together. What is behind the claim? must bring us together. As I've written, the people who are out there are mainly of one kind of people. People can interpret this however they want it, who are going to hold the bridge. We must be prepared to support them in holding that bridge, regardless of our color. And I make that very clear, regardless of our persuasion. But at the same time, those people holding the bridge are humans too. And they've got to know what has happened to their people in Mocha, in Buxton, in Linden, in whatever places, other places that I've forgotten or don't come readily to mind. They are not robots manning a computer. They are people of flesh and blood who have feelings, who have thinking ability. Where is Guyana today? Why is Venezuela how it is? Why this saber rattling? Why this bellicosity? And suddenly we are being told that on this one we are one. It is good to hear, but it cannot be that when this threat pass, and it will pass, because we have paid for the insurance for this that nobody wants to hear that I've been saying for the last 5 years with the contract that we have got as dastardly as it is. That is, or Venezuela would have run across that border already if it was not for for Exxon and having what it has in that deal. I don't like the deal, but I understand what we paid to be where we are today. That we could be talking about it instead of manning foxholes. Now, having said that, we all have to have a piece of this action. I remember the United States soldiers, the black soldiers, they go to fight for the liberation of Europe in the Second World War. When they go back home, they say, "Where's the liberation for us?" So we are fighting to preserve the riches of Guyana. One side of the equation in this country, of the racial formula, is fighting to preserve the riches of this country, the dignity of this country. And what happens after that? That's where we are. That's what the president has to think about. That's what the opposition leader has to put before the president. And that's what all of us have to have, be of one head, Venezuela or no Venezuela, and say, you know what? We've been given riches. Let us not impoverish ourselves in our thinking. We have been given riches, and we all have to have a rightful, fair, just share of it. We spoke about this in Buxton. You have spoken about this many times. I have written about this times that I've lost count. But this is not pre 2015, pre 1990, pre oil. This is oil. It is here. It is a showstopper. It is a difference maker, and it must be used in that context with that vision in mind. By the government and the opposition must see to it that this happens.
GHK Lal speaking there on Venezuela. How come we can come together on Venezuela, but on other substantive issues, we are so far apart? Our government is not helping. It is not helping. It is not helping. It is perhaps the most divisive government that we have had in our long history since self-government in the 1950s. How long? Not long. Not long. The moral arc of justice, the moral arc, as Dr. King said, is long, but it ultimately bends towards justice. Reparations. It was put on the agenda again with the visit of the Gladstones last month. And we have had all the crazy conversation of comparing slavery to indentureship. Should not all of us welcome reparations for Africans, whether we are East Indians or Amerindians or Chinese and Portuguese? If we have reparations for slavery, in the end, it's reparations for all of us. Why can't we not, like the Venezuela issue, have one head when it comes to reparations? GHK Lal.
Look, we should be past any this conversation about reparation. Reparation should no longer require a definition. Reparation has no limitation. There should not be any restriction about reparation in our thinking. We should not be talking about who should get and who shouldn't get. We should be talking about quantum and procedure to
Yes,
make it a reality. End the story. So, so I come and I say, well, what about indentureship? A valid point. I think it's valid. But to equate it, and for me, even to begin to equate it with slavery, it means I've lost more than a few marbles. Or I
mhm.
take my own marble and I squeeze them till they turn square. I don't know if that analogy works or that, but
Oh yes, it does.
yeah, but don't let me try for force this thing where it can belong. There's no look. The people who committed the heinous act of slavery said it's the worst crime ever inflicted upon humanity, man against man, and there's no conversation after that. There's no competition in terms of the application of reparation and the identification of the people who have first claim, first digs that on this issue, this burning issue. We shouldn't be talking about what is equal to or near equal to. We should be talking about let's get this bus moving. Let's get this bus moving so that the ancestors, the descendants, I'm sorry, the progeny of the people who slaved and toiled and were whipped and beaten and scorned and scorched, to be given something for the pain that they still feel. Look, this is not an exciting subject. This is a subject that is born out of profanity, but now has a certain profoundness about it that is wholesome, is encircling. And I think that I, as an Indian, and I appeal to my fellow Indians, government or ordinary citizen, let's see that black people get their reparations first. And you know what? We can get something too. We can get something too. Because that conversation can automatically follow. Oh, let's be not reason. Let's be sequential here. Let's be logical. All ain't gonna happen one time. The people them rowing about it. Look at what happened to the president and the BBC conversation, right? We still we still got some people who digging in their heels and dragging their feet and mean for drag our asses in the mud and keep it there. Rub we face there. And make no mistake, that man is not alone. And make no mistake, that man is not in a minority.
That's right.
What's his name? Richard Mattingly or something like that.
Yes.
I don't, I don't look at local TV. I look at BBC, and somehow I miss that one. But I must compliment the president for standing his ground and say, well, we got to talk. Well, in my words, it's time we talk money. And when you look at the monuments that these people built from slavery and from the British Raj, etc., and the Inca Empire and the Aztec Empire, and they're proud about that. Are we still proud about fighting about who must come first or who would you equal to what? Come on, this is how we allow the white man to rule our minds. This is a different kind of colonialism. This is a different kind of imperialism. Let the thing flow as it should, and reparations for African slaves is like water running downhill, and it must not be impeded to its natural terminal point. Indians and Amerindians and all others who qualify, who have been abused and brutalized, will be a part of that conversation. But that will, like slavery, indentureship came after. So the reparations for indentureship don't come after. I think there's a natural sequence there. I think there's a progression that follows it. And we need to be non political about this. We need to be human about this. I don't think we have to dig for any deep logic. We have to be honest with ourselves. Look, slavery was a most dastardly crime, and therefore there must be a penalty for it. There must be a deep, meaningful penalty for it. I mean, these guys are talking about hundreds of millions of pounds, and you translate it into today's dollars, and it amounts to so many zeros added behind it. So where is something? I mean, nobody's asking for charity here or philanthropy. Where is something of substance for those descendants of the people who paid in blood, sweat, and tears? Let me talk in language that the Englishman and the Englishwoman should understand, because it's straight out of Churchill's rhetorical encyclopedia. Let blood, sweat, and tears, and the shame and pain and the sorrow and the sickness from that time still lingers on to this day, despite some self sufficiency and some self pride that has come about through sheer dint of effort. I think that reparations, the time for reparations is past. It has to happen now, and this must not be how much longer. It must be not much longer.
Not much longer. GHK Lal, my brother, thank you as usual for coming on and sharing with us. Anything that you want to say before we go?
It's that time already, isn't it?
Yes.
But listen, we're at a crossroads in this country, and it's not today we've arrived there. And I'm appalled. I'm appalled, really, David, that we have Guyanese who have not learned the lessons of history and are taking pride in attacking their fellow Guyanese, you or me, if we were to say that what we have, we must put our heads together and stand up against our new exploiters and to get something that benefits all Guyanese. Instead of that, I see a man like Christopher Ram exposes the apparent fraud of Exxon. You don't put the money where you get from Shell on the books. Then when you put it to we for 460, you book that 368 million. You robbing we 92. You robbing we 92 million US dollars. You can tell me but the books were audited. Or if you didn't talk at all. I mean, I'm not even going to go to the 214 audit scandal. But here's the story. Why is it that Guyanese who supposed to be able to have a modicum of thinking are more bent on serving the white man's interest, the exploiter's interest, and there's no racist intent there. It's just a statement of reality, the white man's interest and the white man's vision, and to come down hard on you and me for saying, look, we just want what is fair from our patrimony. I want Exxon to make money. I want Exxon to profit, but I also want Guyanese to have a distinct feel of what their patrimony should mean to them. That is not happening. And so when somebody like me speak about it, I become an enemy. Why do you think that the vice president makes it his duty to attack the few people who stand up against him, people like me? It's not because we are saying him that his eye is black, that his heart is black, or that he's a crook, although there's some doubts about that. What we are saying is that the vice president needs to come clean and deal straight and strong with Exxon, and people like me are going to stand behind him. Instead of that, he puts up a shield, a wall, to barricade Exxon from whatever he's doing with them, and attacks people like you and me for saying, hey, do we really have oil? Then where are the benefits for it for us? And so that's my parting comment. And we've got a lot of work to do here. And unless we roll up our sleeves, whether it's in Washington, D.C. or in Georgetown, not Washington, Georgetown, Guyana, we we are going to be left behind. Venezuela is looking on and saying, all of this is happening and we cannot be placid. We must look at what is going on and say, we cannot be complacent. We cannot allow our wealth to pass through our hands and our children's hands and then say, well, only if we didn't know. People like me and you making the civilian population, the rest of the population know. Therefore, we've got to make it our duty to take things in our hands and take it to another level. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, Brother David, for having me.
And thank you for coming on, Brother GHK. Thank you very much. And to all of you who have come back out tonight after a week, thank you all. Thank you all so much. We continue to march forward. How long? Not long, not long, not long, not long. Ultimately, that arc, that moral arc, it bends towards justice, and it will not be long. It cannot be long. It cannot be long. See you all tomorrow night. We'll continue to cover that conference in Washington, to give you all some of the behind the scenes happenings at the conference. Tonight, I think Rickford Burke is having a special program where he will report on the conference in Washington. But the fact that the government has been carrying on and seeking to lie. We didn't meet with the people didn't meet us, and then when the photographs came out showing that we actually met, then they don't even have the courtesy to say, well, we're caught lying. But anyhow, the struggle goes on, and we'll continue struggling. See you all tomorrow night when we will continue our coverage of the Washington Conference, the teachers' struggle for the right to collective bargaining. We're going to continue watching that situation. Good night, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. We love you.